If you sell and ship to the United States, you probably noticed in the last week a drop in your sales or customers starting to ask you questions about import duties. Well, that's because as of 29th of August 2025, the duty-free allowance on items valued below $800 was scrapped. Now, every single parcel that gets sent to the US has to pay duty charges. Now, this is the biggest shake-up to cross-border selling in many years, and it is going to have a big impact on dealers, resellers, small businesses, whether you sell on eBay, Etsy, or on your own website. So I'm going to go through those changes, try and make sense of them, and talk about things that we can do as UK sellers to try and soften that blow. So to give you an idea of the type of queries you might now be getting, I'm going to share with you one I had from a potential US customer just yesterday, where they asked me about these import duties. I'll put it up on the screen and I'll read it out. So I have not heretofore, which means not up until now, had to pay an import charge. Could you please give me an explanation? Much thanks, Philip. My response to that was, hi Philip, I'm afraid this is caused by tariff changes over in the US. It used to be that items below the value of $800 were not eligible for import taxes, but that was removed on the 29th of August. And yeah, I pretty much said there's not much we can do about it. It's unavoidable. And the response from Philip was, thanks much for this reply. I did not vote for him as he is an imbecile. Thanks, Philip. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of it, although feel free to share your comments below. I'm going to get into what has now changed and what we can now do about it. So what I said there is pretty much it in a nutshell. Okay, so before the 29th of August, we were shipping things to the US and there was no import duties to pay if it was below $800. Now, everything we ship over there will be payments to be made. And this is, of course, is gonna have an impact. There's no getting away from this, because you can't just think, well, I'll just pass it off to the consumer, because that's gonna change, could change anyway, the consumer's decision on whether they're gonna buy an item for you. It's not against you, they just gotta think, well, am I prepared to pay an extra duty charge on top of that? So let's get into the specifics. I've got it written down, so if I'm looking away from the camera, that is why. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about how these charges are now calculated. Okay, and stick with me because it's not a simple figure. It's something that we're going to have to work out and keep in mind when we're pricing our items. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the baseline duty. Okay, so this is a set of reciprocal tariffs, which is crucially now, have to take this on board, is crucially based on where the item you're selling was made. Okay, so it will appear as the country of origin. Now, most people I know who haven't looked into this are going to just put the country of origin as where they're shipping it from. So I'm based in the UK and they'll just put UK, but that is definitely wrong. Okay, the country of origin is where the item itself is manufactured. And based on that country of origin, there is a baseline tariff to every single item, and it changes per country. So I'll give you some examples of this. So if the item is of UK origin, we're at right at the bottom of that baseline, we're at 10%. Okay, so it will be 10% of the value of the item you're selling will be charged as an import duty. If the item though was made in France, which is part of the EU, they have quite a unique set of circumstances, so stick with me. They have a minimum 15%. That minimum will come into, you'll realise what is meant by that later on. But theirs is 15% as a minimum. Okay, you then go to other countries and it does change. For example, I was looking at the African countries and they change considerably. But just to give you an example of how high it can go, if the item is from China, it is 34%. Okay, 34% of the value of the item is the duty charge. So significant amounts. Okay, so that's something you have to keep in mind. Whatever you're selling, the country of origin, where it was manufactured, comes with that charge. Now, I wish I was able to say that's the end of it, but it's not, because there is a base duty on top of that. Now, the base duty, which is an additional percentage, is based on the item itself. What type of item is it? And that changes. If you've ever shipped use Royal Mail shipping and you've seen all the tariff codes, you'll notice quite a lot of them. Sometimes they're a bit of a pain to work out what your item actually fits under. And that base duty changes depending on the item. So I'll give you just a couple of examples, but you're gonna have to check out for yourself, what your one would be. So a ceramic bowl would come under a 9.8% duty. So going back, you've got the baseline tariff. Let's use a UK example. A UK modern bowl would pay 10% because it was made in the UK, then 9.8% on top of that because it's got a 9.8% duty as a bowl. So it's 19.8% of the value of the item. Things like jewellery often comes in around 5 to 6%. There are some examples that I've seen, but double check this, and I believe art actually has 0% on this. Okay, so there we go. That's the first thing. Now, I'm an antiques dealer, so this is relevant to me and anyone who sells items which are antique. Now, antique means over 100 years old. Okay, that's what it means, certainly in this circumstance. So if the item is over 100 years old, it's actually exempt from this base duty. They only pay the baseline tariff, which is based on the country of origin. Okay, that's a crucial difference to be aware of. The other thing to explain in a bit more detail is that EU example. EU is has a very unique set of rules around this, which is that they have to pay a minimum of 15%. So say for example, that's the ceramic bowl example, it wouldn't be just 9.8%, it'd be 15%, not 15% plus 9.8%. This is where it starts to get complicated. You might want to verify this information for yourself. It's quite fresh, this information. A lot of shipping companies are scrambling at the minute. Some of them actually suspended their services to the US, you might be aware of, and recently just opened them back up again. In fact, I'm going to give you an example of that with Royal Mail, because I was going through the Royal Mail shipping process now, just yesterday, and crucially, I noticed something very interesting, which is, and I went through all different examples. I changed the country of origin from UK, then I put France, then I put China in, and all I put was ceramic bowls, ceramic vase, I can't remember. There's nowhere that you would declare that it's an antique, and all they were charging was that baseline duty. So 10% when it was UK, 15% if it was the EU, 30% if it was China. Now, I don't know if that's something that Royal Mail have just made a decision on. Maybe they're taking the cost, who knows? Or, and I think probably more likely, is that they have just released this system. Maybe it's not updating correctly. So enjoy it whilst it lasts anyway, but in the future you might find items which are not antique might have an additional base duty applied even when shipping with Royal Mail. So I appreciate this gets complicated. It's not, I haven't got all the answers here for you. I'm simply trying to make you aware that these charges now apply, and as business, and as people running businesses or even doing it as a side hustle or hobby, you need to be aware of these different charges now, certainly to our US buyers. So I'm going to go through a couple of different scenarios now, depending on where you sell your items. So if you sell on eBay and you sell your items to the US, you're more than likely using the eBay Global Shipping Program, which is a great service where they effectively take control of the international shipping side of it. As a seller, your responsibility is to send it to their depot based in the UK, make sure it gets there safely, then they take care of everything in terms of getting it over to the US or where else in the world it's going. Now, in circumstances from this point forward, if you're using the Global Shipping Program, there's a couple of things you have to make sure that you do. Your item has to have updated in the listing the country of origin. So you have to state where the item was made. If you don't state that, then it will not be eligible for the Global Shipping Program anyway, and it will simply not appear to those US buyers. The next thing on top of that is you will probably know if you use it that you don't actually see, as a seller, you don't see the shipping costs that the buyer would see based out in the US. So when they click on your item, they see what value you put on it, and then they see a shipping cost which is based on eBay's calculations, and in that case they are going to take care of all that. They're the ones who are going to put the shipping prices. Good news, I suppose, in terms of making your life easier. However, you will certainly notice now a dip in your sales. I think that's unavoidable particularly if you're selling, if you're getting into those 10, £20 ranges or further than that. The higher the price goes, the more they're going to have to pay in duty charges. It will have an impact. So the customers are now going to start seeing if they're based in the US, they're going to start seeing larger shipping fees. You might get some queries about that, like I did, that I showed you earlier on, and you might need to deal with that as it comes up and just educate them on what's going on. But that's going to have an effect on eBay global shipping. You just have to make sure that you update your listings to ensure they have the country of origin, and then you have to just be aware that US buyers are now going to see increased shipping costs off the back of this change. If, like me, you run your own website, or if you don't run your own website but you control your own shipping, I use Royal Mail for international shipping. I don't use any other provider, so I'm going to focus on Royal Mail. And if you use other providers, I just recommend you go and check this out with them. So when you're doing with Royal Mail, they've now got a new service called Postal Delivery Duties Paid. And what that means is Royal Mail will collect the duty from you, the seller. They're not gonna wait till it gets in the US and then collect it there. They're only going to ship the item if the duties are already paid. So that makes it your responsibility to collect those duties and pay for them. Okay, crucial change, which probably you don't have to do for anywhere else in the world, but you will have to do it for the US if you're using Royal Mail. I think it's probably for the best. You don't really want to get into the item getting there, then the US buyer realizes the duty charges and then they got to push them back. In fact, if that does happen, or if for any reason you get a return, my understanding is that Royal Mail are not going to repay you the duties. You would have to chase that up with the customs directly. That's my understanding as of right now. The date is the 3rd of September, so take that into consideration if you're watching this at a later date. The other thing with Royal Mail is that they are going to be charging a handling fee per parcel of 50p. Now, in my opinion, it's their job to handle shipping, but there we are, it's in place. So you now got to account for that as well. It's an extra 50p on top of every parcel that you send with Royal Mail. So there we go. That is pretty much it, to be honest. And look, I'm not saying it's simple by any stretch of the imagination. The simple things that you have to remember are that the $800 duty-free allowance, so up to $800 of duty-free allowance for items with shipping to the US, has now been dropped. Every single parcel that you sell will have to have a duty paid, and that duty is based on the country of origin, the type of item that it is, and whether or not it's an antique. Okay, if you keep those three factors in mind, you can start accounting for this as best as possible. There's no getting away from the fact, in my opinion, that this is going to impact sales. It's going to happen. Okay, if you increase the cost to any consumer, you're going to lose a certain amount of sales. Or, especially in the case of eBay, if you use the best offer option, the chances are you're going to start getting lower offers from the US to account for this. Just simple, it's simple reasoning behind that. I'm sure you all understand it. All you can really do is just be aware, as a business owner, just be aware of this cost. Make sure that you're considering it when you're pricing up your items, and of course, crucially, when you're buying your items or you're considering costs to create, make your item. These are now all factors you have to consider when doing that. You have to make sure you're classifying everything correctly. So make sure that if you're listing on eBay or Etsy or even your own website, make sure that the country of origin is now within that listing. And of course, if you're doing your own shipping, you make sure you enter that as best as possible. Look, I think that's pretty much it. I can't really give you many more things than that, apart from be prepared and set up for it, and now take it into consideration when you're making business decisions. There's no way around this. It's been brought in. It's now law. We all hope, of course, that this is something that changes. Maybe a deal is struck or something happens, but you have to just prepare for this now being a new reality. The reality of it as well is that this actually it's more US coming in line with most other countries rather than the US now doing something which is extraordinary. It used to just be something that they had in place. So there we go. If you have any thoughts on that, whether that be your own opinions about this, what you're going to do that you think maybe I missed, or any suggestions you have for fellow UK business owners, resellers, dealers, please leave comments. It'd be interesting to see them. Also keep in mind that I'm giving you the information as I have it on the 3rd of September. If things change and you're watching this at a later date, try and keep updated with that. Now, I'm an antiques dealer. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Kieran Hughes Jones. My website is taliesinantiques.com. I do still use eBay for more clearance items, but most of my items are now available on my own website. I am going to be keeping this channel up to date with how I'm getting on with it and how it's affecting my business. So if you're interested in that type of thing and you'd like to hear and see how things are happening, then please subscribe to the channel, like the video and share it. That's all I can ask from you. But that's it from today. Let me know what you think, and I wish you all the very best with the times to come. Things are getting quite hard at the minute, and I just hope that we can all navigate through it and business keeps on business starts booming again. That's all I can say. All the best. Thank you again. Bye bye now.